We interrupt our regular program schedule to bring you a special report from ABC News.
Britt. I'm Peter Jennings in New York. Good evening. To keep you up to date on Panama, all the signs now indicate that General Manuel Noriega is in American custody. The easiest way for us to start this evening is to say that the President has asked for time on the television networks to speak to the nation. In fact, we anticipate that happening within only a couple of minutes ago, and there have been considerable goings-on in Panama. Let us take a look at some videotape which we saw a short while ago while we listened to ABC's John Martin, who is in Panama City, on what happened. John, we're seeing the people leave the papal nuncio there now. Beth Nissen, who's also in Panama City. Beth, can you tell us what happened?
Well, as far as we know, there was a helicopter that took off. It had been standing by all day. A number of people got onto the helicopter. We have recognized a few of them as local priests and church officials. The papal nuncio was one of the people who was escorting a figure. It's very hard to tell who the figures are in this low light.
But I understand that you've played the tape back and forth many times, and you're reasonably convinced that that is General Noriega in the middle of the group which left the papal nuncio just after dark.
We have no absolute confirmation of that, but all indications are that that is correct. We have been told by a source in the Spanish embassy that Noriega has left the Vatican Embassy.
Okay. ABC's Beth Nissen, who is in Panama City. ABC's Bob Zelnick is now standing by at the Pentagon. And Bob, I gather the Pentagon is now determined to be a little more firm about this.
Peter, administration officials tell me, senior intelligence sources, that Noriega did leave Panama, did leave Howard Air Force Base aboard a C-130 and is en route home to the United States at this time. That's the only additional information that we have at this point, but it seems to be important.
Okay, Bob, and you're also able, I know, Bob Zelnick is able to produce some background for us on how this may have come about in the last few hours, because Noriega's will has apparently been sapped in the last days and hours.
Apparently it was a very lonely situation for him, and deprived of the amenities of power and the comradeship that he had in the past. His will has weakened. I was told a little bit earlier this evening, Peter, that he was being kept going, really. His defiance was by 4 or 5 senior PDF officials who were with him, who had also taken refuge in the papal nuncio, but that it was only a matter of hours until he was willing to surrender to U.S. forces.
Okay, Bob, as you are talking and as the President is preparing to talk, people in Panama City, at least, believe that the general has been put in American custody because there's also already some reaction. ABC's John Martin now available to chat to us. John, is it news getting out into the streets?
It is, Peter. In fact, we can hear the pots and pans being beaten through the night air here in Panama City. The word is spreading by Radio Bemba, the lip radio that goes on here. We think we have something more, of course, than lip radio, because we've had night scopes trained on the airfield right at the side of the embassy. And we've reviewed our tapes, we've frozen them, we've looked at them very carefully. We think we saw the papal nuncio and another priest come out with a figure that resembles Noriega to us shortly before 9. And there were 2 choppers waiting there, some military men with him, as you've probably already reported. And the choppers took off. Noriega appeared to get into the first one, and they lifted off without running lights, so it was very difficult to see them. But we had cameras trained against the night sky and against the skyline, and so we were able to show the choppers leaving, and they did head in the direction of Howard Air Force Base.
Okay, just a note from the White House here, because they are sticklers for the diplomacy of this sort of thing. The President has not officially asked for network time. He said only that he's coming into the briefing room to talk to reporters. That is virtually guaranteeing the President of the United States network time on an evening like this. At the White House, our White House correspondent, Britt Hume. Britt, this came as something of a surprise, I know, to some of the staff there.
Oh, well, Peter, the staff had been waiting with somewhat bated breath here earlier today for some development from Panama, and as of as late as 5 o'clock this afternoon, the word from the Situation Room was that nothing had changed. However, when they officially shut the press office down and locked the doors at about 8 o'clock this evening, there had been no change, but we were led to believe that something could change very fast, as indeed it did. We're now in a kind of a chaotic situation here in the briefing room as the staff is scrambling to get the sound system working so the President can come and talk.
Britt, give us a sense of the mood over the last couple of days, because Everybody knows that General Noriega is an astonishingly wily man. Was the White House depressed they weren't able to get him into custody in the last couple of days?
I never sensed any of that, Peter. I think the feeling was that they had him in a situation which was completely untenable from his perspective, and that sooner or later something was going to have to give. Certainly the Vatican didn't want to be harboring a fugitive, was the feeling here, and that time really was on the side of the U.S., and it was just a question of working out some kind of arrangements under which this would be possible. Now, of course, there are indications that Noriega's own will was cracking under the strain and the pressure of being in a circumstance not at all to his liking.
Brett, let me interrupt you for a second, and let's go back to Panama City, because I can see on one of our other monitors a helicopter there in the night sky, which is on the same time as the eastern United States. It's 9:36 Eastern time in Panama City. John Martin, are we watching normal military traffic at the nighttime?
Well, it is normal in some respects, Peter, in that the choppers have lifted off from time to time at night here. But this chopper came back from the direction that the earlier choppers went toward, which is in the direction of Howard Air Force Base. And it's set down in that same field. So either this is a return trip by the pilot who took Noriega to Howard, or some other pilot, but they come in, as you can see.
John, let me interrupt
lights.
you for a second, and let's go back to the White House. Britt?
Willing to give himself up sometime tonight.
Okay.
We, of course, could not be sure that it would actually occur. President Bush remained in the residence until Secretary Cheney called him at approximately 9 o'clock this evening to say that General Noriega was in our custody. The President immediately came to the Oval Office to work on remarks, which he will be presenting to you in just a few minutes. I'll give you a 2-minute warning in just a second. The President will not take questions following his statement, but General Maxwell Thurman, Commander of Southcom, will hold a briefing in Panama on the details of the situation. General Thurman's briefing will follow the President's statement very soon. We'll be right back.
Well, that is the press spokesman, Marlon Fitzwater, who you couldn't ask for any more official confirmation than that. And a priest in the embassy of the Vatican, the papal nuncio in Panama City, tells us a short while ago that he, in fact, gave himself up at 8:50 p.m. Noriega left just before 9 o'clock, and in the words of that priest, he simply said, Noriega gave himself up. The President now in the White House preparing remarks to make to the nation on what, Britt, will surely be an enormous relief to him that General Noriega is finally in American custody.
Well, I think, Peter, not just a relief, but obviously a triumph for him as well, because I think he felt he'd been very badly embarrassed by the circumstance in October in which the coup attempt was made by the Panamanian Defense Forces members. It failed, and it appeared for a time that it was that the United States had an opportunity to make that succeed, did not do so, and once again that old bugaboo charge that George Bush was a man who did not act with sufficient will, sufficient force, and sufficient daring had been raised, and I think he feels this has been erased by the success in military terms, at least as viewed by many U.S. officials, of this invasion. And now, of course, comes the exclamation point on that from his point of view. I might note, Peter, that just before we were able to hear what Marlon Fitzwater was saying, and you all were able to see it, he did mention that the President got word about 6 o'clock this evening that this was about to happen or might be on the verge of happening. But the final word, of course, didn't come until just after 9 o'clock.
Okay, Britt, well, the President's going to come out in just about a minute from now, so we'll just simply wait here for the President to come and make his remarks and remind you that there's a whole laundry list of charges which Noriega faces not only in Miami but in Tampa, Florida. We were looking at the figures just a while ago. If he were convicted on everything on which he's been indicted, he faces up to 145 years in prison and more than $1 million in fine. But as you may have seen or heard in the press over the last several days, it is not universally held that this is going to be an easy time for the United States to convict General Noriega, and it is quite possible that, among other things, his will in the Vatican Embassy may have weakened, but he may also have decided, talking to his own lawyers, some of whom are in the United States, that it might not be the ultimate risk to come to the U.S. and face charges. Now here's the President.
Well, on Wednesday, December 20th, I ordered U.S. troops to Panama with 4 objectives: to safeguard the lives of American citizens, to help restore democracy, to protect the integrity of the Panama Canal treaties, and to bring General Manuel Noriega to justice. All of these objectives have now been achieved. At about 8:50 this evening, General Noriega turned himself in to U.S. authorities in Panama with the full knowledge of the Panamanian government. He was taken to Howard Air Force Base in Panama, where he was arrested by DEA. A U.S. Air Force C-130 is now transporting General Noriega to Homestead Air Force Base, Florida. He will be arraigned in the U.S. District Court in Miami on charges stemming from his previous indictment for drug trafficking. I want to thank the Vatican and the Papal Nuncio in Panama for their even-handed, statesman-like assistance in recent days. The United States is committed to providing General Noriega a fair trial. Nevertheless, his apprehension and return to the United States should send a clear signal that the United States is serious in its determination that those charged with promoting the distribution of drugs cannot escape the scrutiny of justice. The return of General Noriega marks a significant milestone in Operation Just Cause. The U.S. used its resources in a manner consistent with political, diplomatic, and moral principles. The first U.S. combat troops have already been withdrawn from Panama. Others will follow as quickly as the local situation will permit. We are now engaged in the final stages of a process that includes the economic and political revitalization of this important friend and neighbor, Panama. An economic team under the direction of Deputy Secretary of State Eagleberger and Deputy Secretary of Treasury Robson is just returning from Panama. A team of experts has remained on hand there to assess the full range of needs. We will continue to extend to the Panamanian people our support and assistance in the days ahead. Panamanians, Americans both, has sacrificed much to restore democracy to Panama. The armed forces of the United States have performed their mission courageously and effectively. And I again want to express my gratitude and appreciation to all of them. And I want to express the special thanks of our nation to those servicemen who were wounded and to the families of those who gave their lives. Their sacrifice has been a noble cause and will never be forgotten. A free and prosperous Panama will be an enduring tribute. Thank you all very, very much.
Well, the president said he was not going to take any questions after this, wanting to make a simple statement of mission accomplished, as we suggested at the beginning. At 8:50, he said, General Noriega turned himself in with the full knowledge of the Panamanian government. We'll go quickly around our various correspondents who've been watching and waiting for this to happen, like much of the nation and certainly all of Panama, ever since Christmas Eve, when General Noriega took himself off to the Papal Nuncio. You'll recall at that time the U.S. had the Nicaraguan embassy and the Cuban embassy surrounded, not suspecting he would go to the Vatican, which the president thanked this evening for its full cooperation. Final comment, Ray Hume at the White House.
I'll just say, Peter, obviously this ties this off in the way that the president must have wished. Getting Noriega, I always thought, was going to be difficult. The fact that they did it, obviously, is a political achievement for George Bush, in addition to a military one, and in addition to whatever it may contribute to the war on drugs.
And a final comment now from ABC's Beth Nissen, who is in Panama City. Reaction there from the Panamanians, Beth?
Well, I think the reaction of the people in Panama City was immediately audible. They banged pots and pans with spoons, which is a tradition of protest long-standing among opponents of Noriega. Most Panamanians we talked to over the past week wanted Noriega turned over to the custody of the United States, both out of a sense of justice and because they felt that Panama could not give him the trial he deserved.
In part because the Panamanian government doesn't really have the country under control yet, does it?
The civilian government says that its judicial system is in a, as one of the officials put it, a state of parentheses, not yet capable of trying someone, certainly not a person of General Noriega's stature, and they did not have the prisons to hold him.
Okay, Beth Nissen in Panama City, where the pressure has been taken off immensely, and Bob Zelnick at the Pentagon. A final comment from you. Bob Zelnick has gone away, so we will simply leave you and go back to our regular evening program schedule by just reminding you what the president has said. Ever since Christmas Eve, they've been trying to extricate him, to pry him out of the Vatican Embassy. He gave himself up with the full, oh, I beg your pardon. Somebody will explain in my ear what is happening then. Go ahead, Mitch. Bob Zelnick is standing by at the Pentagon. We'll get on the phone briefly. Bob, go ahead.
Peter, the enthusiasm of President Bush for this moment is not matched throughout the intelligence bureaucracy, I can assure you. I've been told that the CIA has 35 to 40 volumes of facts on Noriega, much of it detailing a 20-year relationship with the intelligence community of this country. And there's going to be an awful lot of linen washed in the next several months as Noriega's trial approaches and during the trial itself.
Do you sense any great fear, any hesitation, any anxiousness at the Pentagon about U.S. secrets revealed in this trial?
I think that there is that anxiety, although, Peter, I should say that the same very good source who told me about this also said that they have done a damage check on President Bush, who, as you know, served as director of the CIA for about a year, and that he has nothing personally to worry about in terms of any taint on his record.
Okay, Bob, stand by for a second. I should just explain to our audience for a second here what is going on. We are now going to stand by for a news briefing that is going to be held by General Thurman, who's the head of Southcom, Southern Command, responsible for Panama in the general stream of events. And Bob Zelnick can tell us a little bit about the role he has played tonight, if anything, Bob.
Well, of course, General Thurman has been a central figure in planning the entire operation and coordinating and supervising it. He was not directly involved in the negotiations with the papal nuncio, but certainly has been given responsibility for protecting General Noriega and getting him back to the United States.
Let me go to Britt Hume at the White House then again. Britt, at the White House, same question to you as there was to Bob Zelnick. Anxiousness there about what a Noriega trial might reveal in terms of U.S. behavior in Panama, in Nicaragua, in El Salvador?
Well, Peter, that is a question that we've had the opportunity to ask, and the answers come back the same every time. No, nothing to worry about there. And I might make this point that while Noriega indeed may have a great deal of information to impart that might be embarrassing to the United States government, and he might consider his trial an opportunity to do that, he's going to have to establish to the satisfaction of some judge under the federal rules of evidence that his activities with the CIA are in some way relevant to his drug-running charges, in order to get them, in order to get the whole subject brought up at his trial and introduced. And then, of course, as we've all witnessed from the Iran-Contra trial, the government can suppress, if it chooses to do so, evidence that, for state reasons, that may allegedly involve vital secrets. Of course, that sometimes means that charges have to be dropped, and obviously it would be very embarrassing to the Bush administration to have that happen. But I do think, Peter, that there is a substantial question of relevance that would have to be crossed by General Noriega in order to get any of this stuff introduced.
There's a sense of correctness, Britt, about this evening. First of all, the general leaves the papal nuncio, is taken by the U.S. military to the Air Force Base in Panama City, and then is arrested formally by DEA agents. That's process, correct?
Well, I think that's right, Peter, and I think that there is some care being taken here to try to assure that the charges against General Noriega, or a possible trial of those charges, is not thrown out by a judge on the basis of the fact that he was improperly arrested, that he was brought back to the United States improperly and by the wrong authorities, by the U.S. Army instead of the Drug Enforcement Administration, or whoever. I'm not sure that all of that will hold water, but I think that obviously is what the administration and the federal authorities are trying to bring about.
Back to Panama City for a moment to ABC's Beth Nissen, because Beth, there has always been the most rampant speculation that General Noriega had something on senior U.S. officials. He and President Bush were heads of intelligence agencies at the same time. They met in 1976. Noriega's been much involved in American affairs in Central America. Has he, in the past, displayed a confidence that he had something on the U.S.?
He has many times, and you're quite right about the rampant speculation. Rumors are a kind of currency in Panama City, and a frequently traded one at that. But I think more than concern over what might be revealed of an embarrassing nature in any testimony during a trial, there is some genuine concern that the actual drug trafficking case against Noriega is perhaps not as airtight as United States officials might have hoped. It is based largely, we understand, on testimony from sources that might, by U.S. judicial system standards, be considered somewhat spurious. And U.S. officials here have been busily debriefing many of the Panamanian Defense Force members and Noriega associates they have captured in the last several days, trying to get, we understand, much better evidence than they now have in hand.
On the subject of searching and searching for information, has there been any documentation found in the wake of the invasion that might be used against Noriega? And even if it's found, are there some concerns there about using it?
There are concerns about using it, about due process in using it, and how the procedures used here might translate in American courts. U.S. officials here and military officials here have really put more stock in the fact that cocaine was actually found in the offices and residence of General Noriega here. Let me just, for folks at home who have not perhaps looked recently at the long list of charges against Noriega, they were handed down in February of 1988. There's a set of them in Miami and there's a set of them in Tampa. They carry a sentence of about 145 years in prison and more than $1 million in fines. Under the Miami indictment, he is accused of accepting a $4.6 million bribe from the Colombian Medellin cartel. And in fact, you may recall that during the invasion of Panama, there was an area of Panama City which had a whole lot of tunnels in it. And the reporting at the time from Panama City was that that was where members of the Medellin cartel went to hide out when there was a particular search going on from them, from the Colombian government. And Noriega is accused of accepting a bribe for hiding them at the time. He's accused of allowing smugglers to use Panama as a way station for drugs traveling from other parts of Central and South America to the United States. He's accused, ironically, of traveling to Havana so that President Castro could mediate a dispute with the Medellin cartel after Panamanian troops had seized a drug laboratory that Noriega had paid to project, etc., etc. In Tampa, he's accused of conspiring to import and distribute marijuana, of attempting to import more than 1.5 million pounds of marijuana, and of accepting $1 million bribe for his authorization to smuggle cash and launder cash, in many cases, through banks in Panama City. Let's go to our national security correspondent, John McCarthy, who's in Washington. An observation, John, there on how the diplomats think about this trial.
Peter, the diplomats have viewed it with some mixed feelings, as you have already covered with some thoroughness. There is a feeling that Noriega's lawyers may have advised him that of all the options available to him, giving himself up to the U.S. might in fact be one of his better ones, considering some of the other options. And that would be because his lawyers regard the case as not all that great, as Beth Nissen has already indicated.
We mentioned that a little earlier. You've talked to some of his lawyers in recent times. They really feel that the Justice Department case is simply not strong enough?
No, but they feel some of the alternatives might not be that great either, Peter. Certainly coming to the United States to stand trial is not something that his lawyers would probably want him to do, although under the U.S. justice system, a lawyer has to advise his client to face justice. That's one of the obligations of a member of the court.
John, only this afternoon, the press secretary of the White House, Marlin Fitzwater, said that the White House or the administration did not rule out a third country option. What might that have been, though it seems rather passé at the moment?
Well, there has been speculation on all sorts of countries. One of the countries where his wife is believed to have gone, of course, is Cuba, and that was a possibility. There had been other countries that had thrown their hat in the ring, ranging from Spain to a number of others. But that has apparently fallen through. One of the interesting things about this case that we're all waiting to find out is exactly what the negotiations really did amount to. The White House has kept a very, very tight lid. It's been a very small circle of people who really know what's gone on over the last week or two.
Okay, one of them is, of course, General Thurman, and we are now told that he will be along to talk to us in about 2 minutes. In fact, he is here already, so let's listen to him. General Thurman.
And he moved by Black Hawk helicopter to Howard Air Force Base, arriving there at 9:03 local time. He departed Howard Air Force Base at 9:31 local time, filing for Homestead Air Force Base in Florida. He is due to arrive there about 6 hours and 14 minutes from takeoff time, or 3:46 a.m. in the morning. As the President of the United States has already indicated, this completes the fourth of the missions that we were assigned when we were directed to come to Panama on the 20th of December this year. And I want to make a special thanks to Monsignor Laboa, who is the Vatican nuncio here in Panama City, for his extraordinary competence, statesmanlike conduct in a period of trying times for the last several days. We appreciate his work. He and Father Joe and Father Joseph and Father Javier all did Herculean work in the last few days to assist in this orderly transfer. Also like to thank the Panamanian government for their cooperation in these efforts, and specifically the State Department team. Undersecretary of State Eagleberger came in last night, spent the day with us, and departed tonight, headed for the United States. Ambassador Davis, the DCM, John Bushnell, Mike Kozak from Washington, just to name a few, who have participated in this effort in the last several days to come to completion on this phase of the operation. If it is useful for you to know that drug enforcement agents took him in custody at Howard Air Force Base, and thus he will be finally turned over in the United States tomorrow morning. And now I'd be happy to answer any questions.
General, did you speak to him or hear any conversation from him? What was his mood when he left?
I did not speak to him. He looked vigorous and confident. He looked fine.
What was your mood when he left?
My mood was job well done by the troops that have come down here, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard, State Department team, Panama Canal Commission employees. All the people in Panama have done a Herculean job, as well as the Panamanian government, the Panamanian people.
General, what convinced him to leave in the final analysis? Did he leave of his own will?
He left of his own will, certainly he did. Walked out the gate. As I said, he looked vigorous, and he was perfectly good shape. He walked out of the door. So the decision to, or walked out of the gate of the Embassy Nunciatura, so the decision was his and his alone.
He got 2 people hurt in the Nunciatura.
I beg pardon?
What about he got some people hurt in the Nunciatura?
Now that I don't know about. I don't know anything about anybody being hurt in the Nunciatura. As far as I know, Mr. Mondrian, Mr. Gaitan, and the Castillos are still in the Nunciatura.
General, Noriega offered anything in exchange for turning himself in?
Mr. Noriega walked out of the gate under his own power and turned himself into custody, and you can check in the Drug Enforcement Agency and check the court system for all of that. No deals here.
General, what was the participation of Panamanian authorities in this?
Panamanian authorities are knowledgeable that the activities were going down as I just described.
What about the
Question?
Were Panamanian officials present when he turned himself in?
Not that I know of.
Did they play any role in resolving this?
I'm sure they did, but I'd rather not comment on those at the moment.
What about Noriega's wife?
What about it?
Noriega's wife?
I cannot give you any description of Mrs. Noriega.
Did you always think you would get him?
Did we always think we would get him? We were happy that he had turned himself into the Nunciatura. The statesmanlike conduct, as the President indicated, of the Vatican in this entire process has been salutary, and we appreciate their assistance.
If there were no deals, what took so long?
People have to make up their own minds about things.
General, what finally convinced him?
I couldn't tell you that.
General, was there any plea bargaining at all?
Not that I know about.
Where will be Noriega held?
Beg pardon?
Where will be Noriega?
I can't tell you that. You'll have to check either with Washington or the Drug Enforcement Agency in the United States. I cannot tell you that. Back in the back.
General, when did you first know this was...
Well, General Thurman is not going to give us much more information than he already has. He's really given us the details on the ground. General Noriega, he says, walked out of the Vatican Embassy under his own steam, looking fit, turned himself into custody. It was an orderly transfer, he said. It'll take about 6.5 hours to get him to Florida. We're not sure that he's going to be indicted in Florida tomorrow, but it sounds very much like it. DE agents took him into custody at Howard Air Force Base in Panama, and there is the story. Mission accomplished for General Thurman, mission accomplished for President Bush. In the next days, we'll learn all of the details of how the United States and the Vatican work this out. But for now, there is the story that the President has been waiting for. General Noriega has turned himself over to the U.S. and is in U.S. custody. There'll be more about this, obviously, on Nightline. I'm Peter Jennings in New York.
This special report came to you from ABC News. We now resume our regular program schedule.